They threw me out of the family meeting. In front of everyone. No warning, no shame, just two guards and my sister's perfect smile telling me I didn't belong. Hi, I'm Rowan, the forgotten daughter. The one they thought would stay quiet forever. But what Maribel didn't know was, before she stood up to humiliate me, I had already handed our lawyer the one envelope that would flip the table on her entire plan. Have you ever been erased by your own family? Have you ever walked into a room where people expected you to fold and stayed standing instead? Tell me in the comments, what would you have done if your own sister tried to rewrite your mother's legacy? Because this is the story of how I got thrown out of the family meeting and handed my sister an eviction notice. You really thought you could throw me out of my own family? I could feel the sticky summer heat pressing down as I stepped out of my old Honda and stared at the Channing estate. White columns, hydrangeas exploding blue along the drive, the whole place screaming of money and legacy. I almost laughed. I never felt less like I belonged here than I did today. My shoes pinched. My dress was the wrong shade of blue. But that didn't matter.
Not now.
Inside, the family had already gathered. Maribel, flawless as ever in a cream sheath, tossing her golden hair with a flick that landed like an insult. My Aunt Della, worrying the strap of her purse between anxious fingers. The rest, a chorus of Channings and Coltons and business friends, all pretending to make polite conversation while their eyes kept cutting to the door. Waiting for the show. Waiting for the outcast to arrive. I stepped into the foyer, and the hum of voices died so fast it made my head ring. Maribel's smile froze into something brittle.
Oh.
Rowan, I thought you might skip this time. Would have saved us all some drama. I looked straight at her, refusing to flinch. I'm here for the reading, Maribel. That's what Mom wanted. The housekeeper, Mrs. Holloway, hovered at the edge of the room, tray in hand, looking anywhere but at me. I nodded a silent thanks and headed toward the terrace, where folding chairs and linen-draped tables waited under a striped canopy. A storm was building in the air. As I stepped outside, the phone screen started flashing, Missy Colton whispering behind her hand, Colton himself smirking. Della offered me a seat at the edge. You don't have to sit alone, honey, she whispered, but I shook my head. I needed distance. I needed to see it all. Maribel stood at the head of the table, glass raised in a fake toast. Before we get to the official business, I'd just like to say how grateful I am for everyone who supported Mom, especially those who were actually present. That stung, but I let it slide. I'd learned not to rise to her bait. The lawyer, Theo Whitaker, sat quietly at the other end, watching everything with hawk eyes. Maribel's voice sharpened. I think it's only fair, before we read Mom's will, to acknowledge that not everyone here pulled their weight. Some people only show up when it's convenient, when there's something to gain. She looked at me, her smile sweet as poison. Colton chimed in. Did you even visit Rowan? I can't remember seeing you at the hospital. I gripped the scarf in my lap, the one with Mom's initials, my talisman. I was there when it mattered, I said quietly. You just weren't looking. Maribel laughed, sharp and bright. You're good at hiding, Rowan. Maybe you should go hide right now. Silence rippled down the table. Some of the younger cousins looked at their shoes. I refused to move. Maribel nodded at the two security men lurking by the patio doors. I think we're done here. Rowan, this isn't your place. Why don't you see yourself out? My mouth went dry. Every muscle wanted to run, to disappear. But something inside me had calcified over years of being made to feel small. I stood.
No.
The word was a thunderclap. I watched Maribel's face twist in shock. I have just as much right to be here as anyone, I said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. This was my mother's house. I'm not leaving. Colton stood, ready to move toward me. Della stepped in, voice shaking. Let her stay, Maribel. For God's sake. But Maribel cut her off with a glance. Family means showing up. All you've ever done is run away. I'm sorry you couldn't be the daughter Mom needed. That did it. My chest burned, but I didn't let her see me break. Instead, I turned to Theo, who had risen silently. He cleared his throat. Actually, I have a document to present before anyone leaves. His tone was calm, but rang out over the hush. Maribel, you'll want to see this. He produced a crisp white envelope. My envelope, the one I'd handed him the moment I walked in. He slid it across the table. Maribel blinked, her confidence wavering. What is this? Theo's eyes never left her. You'll find out soon enough. But I'd suggest you read it before celebrating. The guests leaned in, phones poised for a fresh round of drama. Maribel hesitated, her hand hovering. The moment stretched. Her lips curled. I don't have time for. Theo's voice cold as steel. It's a legal matter. I insist. She yanked open the envelope and her face drained of color. She shoved it back at Theo. Is this a joke? He shook his head. No joke, Maribel. You may want to consult your attorney. A ripple of gasps went around the table. Della squeezed my arm. You did this, she whispered. I nodded, keeping my gaze steady on Maribel. Phase 1, I murmured. For a long moment, the only sounds were the clicks of camera phones and the faint rumble of thunder outside. Maribel tried to recover, but the mask was cracked. Fine, she spat. If you want to embarrass yourself, go ahead. But when you're gone, don't come crying to us. Theo met my eyes, his own smile small but fierce. You can go if you want, Rowan, but the story isn't over yet. I straightened my shoulders. I know. The air felt different, electric, charged. For the first time, the crowd was watching me, not her. I could feel my heart pounding, but I didn't look away. As I turned to leave the table, Maribel hissed, so only I could hear. You'll regret this. I promise. I smiled, just a flicker. We'll see. Rain began to fall, fat drops spattering the patio stones, washing away the last of the day's heat. I walked out through the side door, my mother's scarf clutched tight in my hand, not looking back. The storm had only just begun. There are some things you just can't erase, even if you burn the paper. The rain was still falling when I reached my apartment in Atlanta, small, second floor, nothing fancy, but for once, it felt like shelter. Not from the storm, but from the whirlwind I'd just detonated back at the estate. I stood at the door for a moment, my hand hovering over the knob, soaked to the skin and shaking, not from cold, but adrenaline. The look on Maribel's face when Theo handed her that envelope was already etched into my memory like a painting I'd hang on my wall if I ever got the house back. I flicked on the light and walked into the quiet. The air smelled like jasmine from the plant I'd kept alive since Mom's last visit. That was 3 years ago, back when she still visited me in secret, back when she whispered things she didn't dare say in front of Maribel. I moved straight to the bookshelf and slid out the red binder, one I'd labeled with a sticker that simply read, "In case." I laid it on the kitchen table like a sacred text and opened it to reveal everything I had collected over the past 18 months. Notarized letters, addenda to the will, dated medical reports, voice memos, and most importantly, Mom's final handwritten note. It was creased but intact, her looping script still confident even in the weeks before the end. Rowan, you were the only one who never tried to take. You just gave. I changed the will not because you asked, but because you didn't. I hope one day this proves more than my love. I hope it protects you.
Mom.
I pressed the letter to my chest, feeling the faint scent of her perfume still clinging to the paper. My throat tightened, but no tears came. Not yet. There was still too much to do. Have you ever realized that the only person who truly believed in you is already gone? That the proof of their love is the only thing keeping you standing? If you've ever felt that kind of quiet heartbreak, leave a comment number below. Let's see what I do with the fire her mother left behind. My laptop pinged. Theo had sent over a scanned copy of the legal response we'd filed, an injunction that temporarily froze all estate-related transactions. That meant Maribel couldn't sell, renovate, or touch a cent of Mom's trust until the matter was settled. I replied with a single sentence. I'm ready to go all the way. I closed the binder and opened the drawer in my desk. Inside, I found Mom's scarf, the same one I carried to the estate, and a small voice recorder. I pressed play. She called the contractor behind my back, Rowan. Said it was time to modernize, that the house made her feel trapped. She wants me out, but this is still mine. I built this life. Don't let her make me a guest in my own history. Her voice, though frail, still had fire. It was that fire I needed to carry into whatever came next. A knock at the door broke my focus. I opened it to find Aunt Della, drenched from head to toe, her umbrella blown inside out. Can I come in? She asked, her voice tight. Of course, I said, stepping aside. You didn't drive all the way here in this weather just to make me tea, did you? She shook her head, pulling off her wet coat.
No.
I came because I think you're right. I blinked. About what? About everything, she whispered. I saw the way Maribel panicked when Theo read that notice. That wasn't grief. That was fear.
And you?
You didn't even flinch. We sat in silence for a moment before she spoke again. Your mother came to see me last spring.
Said she was changing things.
Asked me to witness some papers. I didn't tell anyone. I was scared. But I can't keep quiet anymore. I reached for her hand. I never asked anyone to choose sides. But thank you for choosing truth. Della smiled sadly. Your mom left you a hell of a mess. But she also left you the tools to fix it. We spent the next hour combing through documents, statements showing withdrawals Maribel had made while Mom was in hospice, realtor emails that had mysteriously disappeared from shared inboxes, and a timeline Theo had helped me construct. Before she left, Della paused at the door. One more thing. Someone called me this morning. A nurse from the hospice. She said she saw things, heard things. She's willing to talk. My pulse quickened. You have her name? Della nodded. Jeanette Holloway. You might want to call her. As the door closed behind her, I stared at the wall. Things were moving. Faster than I'd planned, but maybe that was a good thing. The phone rang again. This time it was Theo. I've got news, he said. Maribel's attorney filed a countermotion. She's contesting the new will, claims your mother was under duress. Emotional manipulation. Of course she is, I muttered. But here's the twist, he continued. The court date is sooner than we thought. 4 days. If we're going to win this, we need more than paper. We need someone who was there. I took a deep breath. I'll find her. That night, I didn't sleep. I reorganized everything, rehearsed answers to every possible question, and packed the binder into a new leather case I bought that afternoon. Not because I cared about appearances, but because I needed to walk into court looking like I already knew I'd won. Before sunrise, I stood on my balcony with Mom's scarf tied around my wrist, staring out at the gray sky and the city waking up below. You didn't just leave me a house, I whispered. You left me a war. And I'm not losing. You want to talk about loyalty? Let's talk about where the money really went. By the time I stepped through the estate gates again, the press vans were already idling outside like vultures. Cameras pointed, microphones extended. A local channel had even sent a drone, humming high above the front lawn like an omen. The family had called this a private mediation, as if anything Maribel touched could stay private for long. I wore black. Not for mourning, but for battle. Maribel had summoned the key family members to meet and discuss the accusations. Translation: I was about to be ambushed under the guise of civility. But I had no intention of staying quiet this time. Inside the dining room, everything looked staged. The long oak table gleamed under the chandelier. Crystal glasses untouched. Cloth napkins folded like little boats. A fresh floral centerpiece. Lilies and hydrangeas, too white to be sincere. Maribel stood near the fireplace, her arms crossed, face calm in that PR-trained way that always made me want to scream. Beside her sat Brent, still silent as wallpaper, and two cousins I hadn't seen since high school. Della was there, too, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else. Rowan. Maribel greeted me with a smile too bright. We're so glad you could make it. I'm sure, I replied, placing my leather binder on the table like a weapon. We thought this might be a good opportunity, she continued, to clear the air. There have been misunderstandings. I took a deep breath, sat down, and looked her dead in the eye. Then let's clear it. The room tensed. Della shifted in her seat. Brent glanced toward the window like he wanted to jump out of it. Maribel kept her smile, but her fingers twitched against the tablecloth. I have documents here. I began, showing that in the last 3 months of Mom's life, over $27,000 were withdrawn from her personal accounts. Maribel's smile wavered.
She was ill.
There were medical expenses. There were spa visits, jewelry purchases, and a non-refundable deposit on Alexis. I flipped the first page. All from the same joint account you were granted access to after filing the power of attorney without her consent. The room went silent except for the shuffle of papers. She gave me permission, Maribel snapped. She gave me recordings, I shot back. She told me she didn't even know her login had changed. One of the cousins, the one with a fake tan and permanently arched eyebrows, murmured, "Wait, are you serious?" "Oh, we're just getting started," I said, pulling out the second folder. Emails. Between Maribel and a realtor, dated while our mother was still recovering from pneumonia. Discussions about market value, interior renovations, and open house timelines. I was planning ahead. Maribel spat, mask slipping. The house was too much for her. She wanted out. "No, she didn't," said a new voice from the door. Everyone turned. Jeanette Holloway stood there, straight-backed in her nurse's scrubs, holding a manila envelope. Her badge still hung from her neck like armor. She told me she wanted to die in her own bed. Not in a facility. Not in a stranger's condo. She was scared of being erased. Maribel's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Jeanette stepped forward. I was her night nurse. I filed an incident report the day Miss Maribel came into the room waving her checkbook and yelling about contractors. Your mother cried herself to sleep after that. I sat very still, letting the weight of her words settle in the air. Jeanette handed Theo a copy of the report. He nodded. I also have a sworn statement, Jeanette added. I'm prepared to testify. The cousins looked at each other, their faces pale. Della reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She was never confused, I said.
She was tired, yes.
But she knew what Maribel was doing. That's why she changed the will. That's why she documented everything. Maribel exploded. You think this is some noble crusade? You were barely there. You left me to manage everything. I had to make decisions, tough decisions, because you were too scared to be in the room. I was in a room, I replied coldly. When she stopped eating. When she couldn't speak. When she squeezed my hand instead of yours. Her face turned scarlet. You think you're winning? She hissed. You think any of this makes you the better daughter? You're just better at playing the victim. Theo stood, voice calm. If this is the tone the mediation will take, we may as well move straight to litigation. But I wasn't done. I reached into my binder one last time and pulled out a USB drive. I clicked it into the laptop, turned it to face the room, and hit play. Maribel told me today that I should consider what's best for the family by stepping aside. But I know what that means. She wants the money.
The house.
She says it's about legacy, but I've seen the contractors walking through the back gate. I'm not crazy.
I'm not confused.
I know what she's doing. The voice was unmistakable. My mother's. Firm, unshaking. Maribel's expression crumbled. She didn't mean that, she whispered. She was scared. No, Jeanette said softly. She was lucid. That was the most herself I'd seen her in months. I closed the laptop slowly, savoring the silence. The damage was done. All rise, because what you're about to see will change everything. Courtroom 3B smelled like floor polish and old arguments. The benches creaked when people shifted, and every few minutes a cough or phone vibrated somewhere in the rows. But none of it mattered. Not the press hunched in the back with notepads poised. Not the cousins 2 rows behind me whispering like they weren't part of this mess too. What mattered was that I was here. And she was here. And justice, cold, public, irreversible, was about to be served. Maribel stood on the opposite side of the courtroom, dressed in pale pink like she was headed to a charity brunch. Hair perfect, lipstick soft, expression calculated. She had that look again, the one that said she thought she could still spin this. Charm the judge. Flip the story. I hope she tried. The bailiff called out, "All rise," and the judge, a stern woman named Loretta Givens, stepped up to the bench. Her black robe looked too heavy for the Georgia heat, but her gaze was sharp as cut glass. This court is now in session regarding the estate of the late Eloise Channing. She didn't waste time. Miss Maribel Channing, you may present your claim. Maribel's lawyer, a slim man with a too-slick tie, stood. Your Honor, we are here to contest the second will submitted by the petitioner, Rowan Channing. Our claim is that the document is invalid due to undue influence, issued under emotional duress during the late Mrs. Channing's decline. He gestured toward me, all condescension. We believe Miss Rowan leveraged her mother's weakened state to manipulate the estate in her favor. I stood up.
Calm.
Ready. Your Honor, I said, I have documentation. A notarized will, dated after the one my sister submitted, signed in the presence of 2 witnesses, one of whom is in this room. The judge raised a brow. Submit it. Theo stood and approached the bench with the envelope we'd protected like sacred scripture. Inside, my mother's final wishes. Judge Givens opened the document, scanned it silently, then nodded. Initial impression, valid. I will review authentication records, but please proceed. Maribel's lawyer stepped in again. If I may, Your Honor, we believe that Miss Rowan may have coached the decedent, played recordings, influenced her during a period of cognitive fragility. She wasn't fragile, I said, voice cutting through the room. The judge gave me a nod. You may respond. She was recovering from pneumonia, not demented, not confused, and I have medical records to prove it. And more importantly, I looked straight at Maribel, letting the air thicken. She made her intentions very clear. In her words, on camera. Gasps fluttered through the room. Even the judge blinked. Theo turned to the tech operator in the corner. Play the video file, please. The lights dimmed slightly, the screen lowered. I braced myself. And there she was. My mother. Frail, yes, but composed. Her voice steady, even if her body trembled. If this is being played, it means Maribel has contested my will. Again, let me be clear. I was not coerced. I changed the documents because she tried to put me in assisted care without consent. She hired contractors to walk through my home while I was asleep. Rowan did not ask for anything.
She protected me.
This was my decision. Entirely.
And I stand by it.
The silence afterward wasn't empty. It was electric. The judge looked down slowly, then turned to Maribel. Do you wish to respond? Maribel stood, shaking now, the edges of her control cracking. She was dying. She didn't know what she was saying. I was doing what was best for the family. She was scared. She didn't understand how complicated things were. Or maybe she understood too well, I said. Her eyes locked onto mine.
Red.
Furious. You twisted her, she shouted. You showed up after years of silence and convinced her I was the villain. The judge banged her gavel. Order. Theo stood. We also have emails from Maribel's account discussing plans to liquidate the estate, while Mrs. Channing was still alive and medically alert. More rustling. The press scribbled. I watched as Brent slid lower in his seat like he wanted to vanish. And we have financial statements showing large withdrawals from joint accounts, unauthorized by the decedent, Theo added. Judge Gibbons held up a hand. I've seen enough. Maribel froze. This court finds the July 9th will to be legally valid.
Witnessed.
Notarized. Consistent with testimony and verified documentation. This will stands. The words hit like a hammer.
Even I had to take a breath.
Maribel stumbled back into her chair, whispering to no one. Her hands clutched the hem of her blazer like it might hold her together. The judge continued, unfazed. The court will finalize this recognition in the coming days. As for the petition to challenge the will on the grounds of undue influence, it is denied. I closed my eyes for half a second, not to cry,
To breathe.
to absorb it. The room shifted. Energy turned. I wasn't the girl in the corner anymore. I was the heir. Outside the courtroom, Theo handed me a copy of the ruling. This doesn't end her games, but it ends this chapter. I nodded. She'll find another way to spin it. Maybe, he said. But today, you won. If you have nothing to hide, why are you so scared of the truth? By Wednesday morning, Maribel was live on Channel 9. I stood in my kitchen, coffee in hand, the morning sun slicing across the counter, and watched her crocodile tears roll down a face so carefully composed it looked airbrushed. Her voice trembled at all the right syllables. Her hands clutched the worn scarf she hadn't touched in years. She was confused, Maribel told the camera, her tone just on the edge of noble grief. We did everything for her. My husband and I took care of every detail. Rowan only showed up when there was something to gain. I turned up the volume. Let's talk about timing, shall we? The anchor nodded solemnly. Miss Channing, is it true your sister presented a second will just days after your mother passed? She had it ready, Maribel whispered. It's almost like she was waiting. Like she knew. She knew. I threw back the rest of the coffee, set the mug down, and pulled out my laptop. There was no point waiting. 2 hours later, I posted a public video. No filters. No dramatic lighting. Just me in a clean black blouse, hair pulled back, with a stack of documentation beside me like a fortress of truth. My name is Rowan Channing. I began. I've kept quiet for a long time because that's what I was taught to do. But silence protects no one but the people who abuse it. I slid a document toward the camera. This is the official notarized will of Eloise Channing, signed July 9th, witnessed. Verified. It names me as sole inheritor. Not because I asked for anything, but because I refused to take advantage of her when she was sick. Cut to screenshot. Mom's hospice report. Her quote in handwriting, "Don't let her sell the house while I'm still breathing." I looked back at the lens. This wasn't a rivalry. It was a cover-up. And now the truth is out. Have you ever had to expose someone you love because protecting the truth mattered more than protecting their image? That kind of courage doesn't come easy. If you've ever been forced to choose between justice and family, leave a comment number 8 below. Now, let's see how the world responded to my truth. I ended the video with one sentence. You don't get to rewrite history just because you speak louder. By noon, it had 53,000 views. The press turned in hours. First, local reporters. Then Reddit threads dissecting her Chanel blazer, questioning why the grieving daughter needed 3 stylists for a 10-minute interview. Then a podcast clipped my video and titled it "The Channing Heir We Should Have Believed." By Thursday morning, I was invited onto Real Justice Now. I didn't accept. I didn't need to. The evidence was doing the work for me. Even Janie, who hated confrontation, posted a reel, a side-by-side of Maribel's TV interview next to the will signing video. The caption was simple and devastating. One of these women protected her mother. One of them tried to evict her. The comments lit up. At Loyaltiest Action, Maribel's tears dried up the second the camera stopped rolling. At Truthwinselways, protect Rowan at all costs. At Notanothereris, finally someone stood up to Southern family politics. Bookmarking this for Thanksgiving. Maribel didn't stay quiet, of course. She doubled down. Hired a PR firm. Launched a website called The Real Channing Legacy. Photoshopped family pictures. Quotes pulled out of context. Even a blog post from some cousin in Dallas who claimed I always resented Maribel's beauty and leadership. But it was too late. The momentum had shifted. The story was no longer hers to spin. The final blow came during a local town hall, where Mom used to volunteer. The organizers had invited Maribel to say a few words in memory of Eloise. She showed up with a speech, press in tow, and a string of curated anecdotes. She never got to finish. As she stepped onto the podium, an older woman, Miss Judith, one of Mom's oldest friends, stood from the audience. "She doesn't belong up there," Judith said, voice clear as a bell. There was a hush, broken only by a few stunned gasps. She didn't sit with Eloise when she cried. She didn't hold her hand when the pain hit. That was Rowan. The crowd murmured. A few people nodded. One woman walked out. Maribel faltered, her note card shaking. "She just wanted to be remembered," Judith continued. "Not rebranded." Maribel stepped down, face like porcelain ready to crack. That night, Della came by with a casserole and a bottle of wine. We didn't toast. We didn't need to. I sat on the porch steps, scrolling through messages, some from strangers, some from neighbors who hadn't spoken to me since high school. One said, "I never had the courage to stand up to my sister. You did." I blinked hard, then typed back, "It's never too late." You can tear up the papers, but you can't rewrite the truth. I arrived at the courthouse 15 minutes early. Not because I was eager, but because I wanted to own the moment. I stepped out of Theo's car dressed in slate gray slacks, a crisp white blouse, and the scarf. Mom's scarf. The same one I carried through every round of this war. It was tied neatly around my wrist now, like a quiet kind of armor. The crowd outside had changed. Less press. More regular people. One woman nodded at me with a look I couldn't quite name. Pride, maybe. Or solidarity. I nodded back and walked inside. Maribel was already there.
She didn't look at me.
Her once blushed cheeks were pale. Her lips, usually painted in some flattering shade of power, were bare. She sat flanked by her legal team, but she might as well have been alone. Even Brent wasn't there. Judge Givens entered, and everyone stood. The air felt different. Final. Like something long overdue had come to collect its debt. This hearing is to formalize the probate ruling in the matter of the late Eloise Channing's estate, the judge announced. All parties have submitted final documentation. Before we conclude, is there anything either side wishes to submit? Theo stood. Nothing further from the petitioner, Your Honor. Maribel's lawyer opened his mouth, but she placed a hand on his arm and shook her head. Judge Givens looked between us. Her eyes lingered on Maribel, just long enough to register something resembling disappointment. Then she spoke. The court recognizes the July 9th will as the final and binding testament of Eloise Channing. The property, accounts, and all residual holdings are to be transferred to the sole inheritor listed therein, Miss Rowan Channing. I didn't move. Not at first. Because for a second, it didn't feel real. Then I exhaled. And it was over. Judge Givens continued. Furthermore, the court rejects the opposing claim of undue influence. The documentation, video evidence, and testimonies demonstrate clear intent and cognitive capacity. Maribel flinched. The words hit her like raindrops on glass. Small, but relentless. The judge closed the folder. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down, and with it, 15 years of being the afterthought cracked into dust. Outside, the sky was gold. The sun filtered through the courthouse columns like something biblical. I stepped out, and for the first time in years, I wasn't walking in anyone's shadow. Theo touched my elbow. You did it. She did it. I corrected. We didn't speak much on the ride back. There wasn't anything left to say. At the estate, Brent's car was already gone. Maribel's belongings were packed into a van parked at the curb. No one was helping her. No cameras. No family. Just the sound of boxes hitting metal and the occasional clink of crystal wrapped in newspaper. The air outside the house wasn't quiet, it was watching. 2 gardeners paused mid-trim. One neighbor I hadn't spoken to in years stood on the sidewalk with arms folded, nodding slightly when our eyes met. Even the housekeeper, Mrs. Holloway, lingered just behind the screen door, not offering help, just witnessing. I stood by the gate and watched her.
She saw me. She didn't wave.
Didn't speak. She just stared, not with hatred. With the hollow realization that she had lost everything she couldn't fake her way back into. She lifted one last box into the van herself. Her heel caught on a crack in the pavement, and for a second, she stumbled. No one moved to catch her. From the porch, I finally spoke, not loud, just enough to reach her ears. This house remembers what you did, Maribel. Even if you don't. She straightened slowly, her expression blank. There was no venom left in her. Only exhaustion. You got what you wanted, she muttered. I shook my head.
No.
I got what she wanted. She held my gaze for a heartbeat longer, then climbed into the passenger seat. The van pulled away, slow and quiet, as if the street itself was done with her. I turned and walked through the front doors, my front doors. The scent of lemon polish hit me like a memory. The hall was just as she'd left it. I passed through the foyer, brushing my hand along the banister, and reached the drawing room. The curtains had been tied perfectly, staged for buyers who never came. I pulled them loose, let the sun back in. Then I did what Maribel never could. I opened the front parlor windows wide. Let air and dust and memory all mix together like they belonged. In the kitchen, I removed the fake flower arrangement she'd placed on the counter. Beneath it, I found the old brass tray Mom used for tea, scratched, slightly bent on one corner. I ran my fingers over the edge, then placed it in the center of the table where it belonged. Rowan Channing didn't need a redesign. She needed restoration. Stella arrived an hour later. She carried a box, small, wooden, polished. "Found this in your mother's sewing chest," she said. "She labeled it for you." I opened it on the kitchen counter. Inside was a letter, a folded picture of the two of us at the garden when I was 10, and one gold bracelet I thought had been lost. The letter was short. "You were always the quiet one. But your quiet never meant weak. It meant you were waiting. I hope you know I never stopped seeing you. Love, Mom." I closed the box, ran my fingers over the wood, and sat in the window seat overlooking the yard. For years, I had wanted someone to speak up for me. Now I had spoken for myself. I finally sit in the house that once tried to forget me, not as a guest, not as a shadow, but as its rightful keeper. The silence no longer weighs me down. It honors me. I didn't just survive their betrayal. I rebuilt something they tried to erase. The truth is simple. When you stand up for yourself, you stop being a victim. And when people try to rewrite history through control, manipulation, or entitlement, they will always lose to someone who carries proof and purpose. Have you ever been pushed out of your own story? Have you ever had to fight for your place, your voice, your truth? If this story speaks to something inside you, share it. Tell me your version. Because silence protects no one, but your voice just might set someone else free.